in order to start in time, we will start, inshallah. So I would like to welcome all of you, especially our guests from outside the university. I'd like to welcome them on behalf of the College of Islamic Studies and the Islam and Global Affairs program. I am delighted to welcome you to our Visionary Leaders program, a distinguished initiative at the College of Islamic Studies. This initiative spotlights leaders whose moral quality and strategic foresight change history, among them Nelson Mandela, Ali Izzat Bukovic, and Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, and others. We study their approach to reconciliation, governance, and transformation to inform solution to today's challenges. The Master of Art in Islam and Global Affairs at the CIS, the College of Islamic Studies, HBKU, prepare ethical, globally minded leaders through in-depth study and real-world engagement. The program explores peace building, governance, humanitarian action, and economic transformation across the Muslim world, bringing tradition and modernity together. Tonight we focus on Malcolm X, his voice for human dignity, moral courage, and global solidarity. His journey from exclusion to learning and spiritual renewal. His pilgrimage that reformed race through universal ethics, and his final turn to human rights paradigm continue to inspire communities worldwide. We are honored to host two distinguished scholars. Dr. Recep Senturk, author of Malcolm X, The Struggle for Human Rights. Dr. Recep is Dean of the CIS at HBKU, a philosopher and a thinker, founding president of Ibn Khaldun University. His work examines how faith, community, and ethics ground a universal vision of rights. His publications include Adamiyya, Futuwa, Malcolm X, Comparative Theories, a Method Between Uniplexity and Multiplexity. Distinguished Professor Dr. Akel Ismail Kahera, Distinguished Professor and Director of the Graduate Program in Islamic Architecture and Sustainable Urbanism at CIS HBKU. He has also held a range of academic and administrative roles, including Professor and Dean at Virginia Commonwealth University School of the Arts in Qatar, Professor and a Senior Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies at Clemson University in South Carolina. His scholarship links Islamic thought, culture, and the built environment with an emphasis on public life and civic space. Our plan for this evening is as follows. Each speaker will have about 30 minutes to present his presentation. Then we will give the chance for the commentators. We have 4 commentators today: Ambassador Ghulam, Dr. Shergawi, and Ustaz Muhammad Qutb, Professor Tijani Abdul Qadir. We will give each commentator 5 minutes, and then we'll open it for the floor for any comment or answer. And maybe we will conclude by giving back to the authors, the two professors, if they want to make any comments on the commentation. So now we will start, inshallah, by Professor Akel Ismail Kahera, who will start the session.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am thoroughly delighted to engage in this conversation. I want to begin by sharing with you my first experience with the personality of Malcolm X. As a young high school student growing up in Brooklyn, New York, I attended Boys High School in Bedford-Stuyvesant. And I was fortunate to have teachers who were really progressive and forward-thinking. So one of the required readings for me as a high school student was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And this is a text that really invites us to understand the personality of this man, his courage, his fortitude, his pursuit of knowledge, and his fight for civil rights. I want to begin, though, by Marcus Garvey, a preacher teaching pride and self-determination. Louise Little, his mother, who was an educated woman, multilingual, familiar with literacy and resistance to the demise of identity, inheritance, and the rule of law. When the American society attempted to destroy that foundation, certain elements in the American society which still exist today, through violence, surveillance, poverty, the lessons remain. And I remind you here that Malcolm was born in Omaha, Nebraska. His house was burnt to the ground by the Ku Klux Klan. They were forced to move to Lansing, Michigan. His house again was burnt to the ground. So here he is in this situation where the obvious elements of racism manifest itself in ways that affect not just the society, but individual people as well. You can imagine what a young man at this age going through the trauma of seeing his house being burnt on 2 occasions. And to add to that, his father, again, who was a committed follower of Marcus Garvey, was, according to police report, accidentally killed by a streetcar. That's the official police report. But the truth is, he was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. Welcome, Dr. Senturk.
I am sorry, I have to introduce Omar Suleiman.
Malish, we forgive you. Well, we're happy to have you. I'm just starting. Yet the world forced Malcolm into the margins. A school system, which I'll talk about, forced a brilliant young man into the margins of society, forced him to the streets, and it shaped the displacement, the prison architecture, the racial exclusion. All of these are factors that add to the personality of this person. But nevertheless, in prison, again taking inspiration from his parents, he returned to the lessons of his parents. According to Alex Haley, he copied the dictionary, which is an incredible task. I can't imagine anyone would attempt to do that today. We're too reliant on Google and ChatGPT. And I know some of my students are here. I encourage them to read the dictionary, but I'm not sure if they do or not. Anyhow, he copied the dictionary page by page. He devoted himself to history, to philosophy, the study of religion. Language became liberation. His thought process developed through his commitment to books. But his education did not end in the prison cell, in the penitentiary. It evolved later in the public domain, in the mosque. It was sharpened on the podium when he gave speeches. It expanded on the road to Mecca when he performed the pilgrimage. The Hajj, in this sense, was not a journey of geography, it was a journey of consciousness. So, in Mecca, Malcolm witnessed a human brotherhood, which he commented on in the autobiography, unfettered by race, status, and hierarchy. He understood the principle that kullukum min Adam wa Adam min turab, that we're all descendants of Adam, and Adam is made from clay. So there was no room for race and the blatant elements of exclusion and racism that he was so accustomed to in the United States. Men and women of every color praying together, eating as one, walking as one. The Hajj, however, did not erase his critique of racism, it refined it. It widened the horizons of his justice, from black dignity to global human dignity. So, if we pause for a moment and think about the influence of his parents, the fact that they were committed to the liberation struggle, they were followers of Marcus Garvey, one could see the formative years of this young man thinking. And then when he goes on elementary school, perhaps the only African American kid in the entire class, he was elected as president because of his knowledge, his intelligence. He dreamed to become a lawyer. And when the teacher asked him, what would you like to be when you grow up? He said, I'd like to be a lawyer. And she responded, it's best for you to be a carpenter. So even within the system of education, where students should be encouraged, where one should develop their career goals and thinking and cultivate ambitious dreams in ways that you can contribute to society, he was marginalized even in that situation. And even though all of the students, by consensus, had voted for him as the most intelligent young man to be the class president. So I'm trying to build here a narrative which gives you a sense of his fate. He never gave up. He pursued his goals in spite of the difficult circumstances which he continued to face throughout his life. So he dropped out of school at age 13, okay, and this introduces a new phase in his life. But nevertheless, when he was incarcerated in Boston for 6 years in jail, he again returned to his commitment to studying, to reading, self-education, reading philosophy, reading history, and this transformed his worldview. Malcolm always said that the prison was his alma mater. Powerful statement. The prison is my alma mater. And interestingly enough, in New England, in Boston, there were graduate students from and professors from Harvard University, Boston University, who would go and do community service, as we would call it today, and teach in the prison. I did that when I was working in the United States. I would volunteer and go and give lectures. It was an interesting experience, but one that could be scary at times, right? I remember one of the things the prison warden showed us when I entered the prison. I'm giving a lecture on Islamic architecture to prisoners, and their enthusiasm is amazing, right? Because you're confined in this place. So knowledge is power, it's food, right? The prison warden showed us all of the possible weapons that could be made from utensils, from any utilitarian object. This is a place where survival was the utmost object of everyone. That didn't deter me. I still lectured in the prisons. So one could understand, and one of the things that Malcolm tells us that in his prison, he joined a debating society. That's where he developed his oratory skills. Apart from his reading, his commitment, he would read at night. When the lights went off, he would still continue to read. And when the guards came by, he would pretend that he was sleeping. And he would read from the illumination of the lights in the corridor next to his cell. I wish my students would do that.
But
Anyhow.
first you do it, then they will do it.
I've already done it, Kalas. So I'm just illustrating this to show to you the fortitude one individual can have in pursuit of knowledge and how important it was in shaping his character at a later date. And these are some of the books that Malcolm read. It's a long list. Alex Haley mentions the list. You know, he read Arnold Toynbee, The Study of History, which comes in, I think, 5 volumes. Will Durant, The Loom of Language. He read Kant, Nietzsche, and other texts. So one can imagine why he would make the statement that the prison was his alma mater. But after spending 6 years in jail, after coming out, it's almost like having a BA degree, maybe a master's, right?
Because very intensive.
Yes.
A lot of credits, which may be equal to PhD.
Exactly. And you have nowhere to go. So you have to read, you have to debate, you have to absorb it up. So this is just to give you an example. Now I want to, for those of you who are not from the United States, I want to construct for you a scenario where the 60s, remember that Malcolm X was assassinated in 1965 in February. He was barely 39 years old. Civil rights was on the top of the agenda in America in the 60s. And so you have figures like Angela Davis, who is still alive, Stokely Carmichael, who eventually left the US. He was the founder of SNCC, the Student for the Nonviolence Coordinating Committee. Martin Luther King, who was assassinated in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. Medgar Evers, who was killed in the driveway of his house. He was a lawyer. And of course, Muhammad Ali, who refused to join the military and go to fight in Vietnam. These are just some of the figures that were prominent during the 60s. And many of them were influenced or had ways of understanding how important the struggle was for civil rights, for human rights, and they shared many philosophies and goals. Their differences were minimal. We could also talk about the Black Panther Party, which was formed in Oakland, California, Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, the Young Lords, which was formed in the Bronx in New York. These were prominent organizations that were struggling to get their rights. And it was only until 1964 when President Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act, 100 years after the end of slavery in 1865. But it couldn't have happened without a struggle. As Frederick Douglass says, if there's no struggle, there's no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And so many of these groups were also equally influenced by Malcolm. He was an excellent orator. They respected his honesty, they respected his knowledge, they respected the fact that they could identify with some of the ideas that he was espousing in order to bring about change in the United States, to bring about human rights. And even until today, I know Dr. Senturk has written 1 or 2 books on Malcolm. 1? Okay. You should think about a second one.
I'm thinking about Clara Mohammed.
Okay, we'll talk. But nevertheless, in addition to Dr. Senturk's book, there's still, I was just reading today in the New York Times that 2 books were just recently released. So this study, this character, this person is still in the minds of scholars. It's still in our minds because I think his contributions to civil rights and to freedom is still a study that is not fully understood. And I know your approach, you looked at it from the point of view of ontological study as a sociologist. Others have looked at him in terms of his politics, his social agenda, and so on. So there's no shortage of knowledge about this person, and all of it stemming from the fact that his contributions were so vibrant and so powerful and meaningful to American society. And this is a society that is still struggling with these issues until today, especially under the present regime that we have. So I mentioned earlier how the Black Panthers were influenced by Malcolm. The Young Lords, which came out of New York City, were also influenced by him. And they shared this fight against inequality, against poverty, and they were struggling for a society that had reneged on its promise to its citizens to give people equal access. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. Thomas Jefferson. But that was never fulfilled. And it's still not fulfilled until today. There are ways in which people have denied the rights of people, equal rights. And of course, many of us were quite pleased around 1993, I believe it was, when Spike Lee produced the movie Malcolm X. And I think that inspired the next generation of young people who, unlike myself, who grew up in Brooklyn at the time, a few years after Malcolm was killed, I was familiar with him. But 25 years later, people did not know who he was. He became sort of something vague to them. But with Spike Lee producing the Malcolm X movie, it introduced his life once again to the American public, and it had a tremendous impact. Of course, people who didn't read the book, they saw the movie. And some people saw the movie and then read the book. So the power of course, Spike Lee, a brilliant filmmaker from Brooklyn, like myself. Anybody else here from Brooklyn? Did a fantastic job. And then, of course, when the event of Malcolm's assassination took place, it was a brutal shock to many people, not just people in the Muslim community, but I remember meeting John Henry Clark, a notable historian in New York City, who knew Malcolm personally, and he tells this story of having dinner with a family in Connecticut, and the way they disparaged Malcolm, when they heard his dad he was assassinated, really hurt John Henry Clark. And he said he excused himself and he went to the bathroom and he cried. So Malcolm was friends with people in the academic community, scholars, many, many people who saw him as a potential for change in the society. So his death was a major loss. But not unlike Martin Luther King, not unlike Medgar Evers, not unlike many of the other people who were silenced, people like Fred Hampton and others who were silenced because of their views. Nevertheless, we're fortunate today there are still markers which remind us of his presence. And in many cities throughout the US, certainly in New York City and other places, there are now street signs which commemorate and remember him by acknowledging his existence. A couple of quotes before I conclude, which was very difficult for me to share a few quotes because there's so many and they're so potent. But nevertheless, here's an attempt to share with you a few. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Very, very relevant. I would just like to study. I have an open mind. I'm interested in almost any subject that you can mention. In the concluding chapter of the autobiography, he says he would go back to school. He would start off again in 9th grade if he had a chance to. A man or woman who stands for nothing will fall for anything. So, is there volume on here? Arshad, we need your technological wisdom.
Start from the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Of the Bluetooth maybe.
Why don't we invite Malcolm himself to come and address us now instead of...
If you have the power to do that, tafaddal.
I think it's technical issue.
Is it the opening of the Oxford Union?
Yes, I think it's the end of it. It's in the documentary called Make It Plain, where he's quoting Shakespeare here. Incredible. And I wanted to share that with you, but it's okay.
You can play the mobile maybe sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Near the mic, near the mic.
And have no feelings, be nonviolent, and love his enemy. No matter what kind of attack, be it verbal or otherwise, he's supposed to take it. But if he stands up and in any way tries to defend himself, then he's an extremist. think that the speaker who preceded me is getting exactly what he asked for.
All right. That's not the quote I wanted to share with you. It's where he was quoting Shakespeare, to be or not to be. You all know the quote, right? So I want to end here because I've only been given 30 minutes, right? And we can continue the conversations in the Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this is very interesting and deep. Thank you, thank you. Professor Rajab, I introduce you not as a dean, but as a thinker, as a philosopher. Here I introduce your book, Adamiyya and Futuwa and other things. So you have 30 minutes. I mentioned Malcolm X of your book, which is going to be the core of your speech. So,
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا وحبيبنا وطبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهب لنا من أمرنا رشدا اللهم أرنا الحق حقا فارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا فارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم انصر من نصر الدين فاجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل الدين ولا تجعلنا منهم. I thank Dr. Osman for organizing this event, and I thank my dear colleague Dr. Akel. They are both Brooklynites, you know. I spent like several years in Brooklyn and also in Manhattan when I did my PhD at Columbia University. So probably we have something in common, you know, we inherited from Brooklyn. I thank all of you for being with us in this event. The question I want to raise, what's the legacy of Malcolm X? And how he reached to this point to leave a legacy to the entire humanity. This guy, he's coming from a very low background, and like people like him, usually they die without leaving anything behind them. But he reached to a level, he left a legacy behind him, and today almost in all societies, you know, around the world, his message resonates. Leftist, Muslim, revolutionary, like all these people, they appropriate, you know, his message. So how he reached to this level? So this legacy I want to raise. So I wrote this book, and it seems Dr. Mustafa Osman already mentioned. So first I wrote in Turkish, and this book became like a bestseller. I think it's printed more than 25 times. You know, each time, you know, many thousands copies. Then it's translated to Arabic and you know, printed in Syria first, and then this is the second edition. Then it's translated to English also. So there is such a growing interest in his legacy, and my relationship with him is a very interesting relationship. But I study his legacy from a human rights perspective. I was a visiting researcher at Emory Law School, and on the wall there was a poster. There was like photographs or pictures of contemporary human rights advocates, maybe 40 or 50 of them. None is Muslim. I was very upset with this. How come like there is no Muslim in this picture, and you have only like non-Muslim Westerners as advocates of human rights, as if the issue of human rights only like a Western issue, and because there are some people who argue that like human rights is born in the West. And people outside the West, they have no idea of human rights. So I ask myself, if I'm given opportunity to add the picture of a Muslim among these people, whose picture I would put there? And I thought about it. I said, the most appropriate one is Malcolm X's picture. I would put his picture, among these other people, although like many others, from India, from Bangladesh, from Turkey, Arab world, but he would be the most suitable to add there. Then I got like interested more in his universal human rights message, and I was thinking about like doing something to highlight this. Then I was requested to write this small book for young people, and I wrote it, no footnotes, easy to read. It's a, you may say it's written from a perspective of psycho-spiritual biography, psycho-spiritual and intellectual biography. It's about his inner journey, how he got transformed. What are the transformative moments in his life, an inner journey. But before that, I read his biography when I was in high school. It was really touchy. I came to the point of crying when I read his life. In particular, I was like so shocked when I learned that he was the leader of Muslims in America, but he learned how to make salat in Hajj after so many years. How come like Muslims of America are so neglected by the rest of the world, and nobody cared about them? Nobody went there to teach them Islam, and they were trying to learn it by themselves. So this was my first encounter, with Malcolm X. But there is another more like a touchy encounter with him. When I went to Columbia University, it was in at the end of 1989. At fall, I was walking on the 116th Street, and then I heard azan. I said, "Oh my God, I got crazy." I lost my mind. I started hearing voices. It cannot be real, like azan. How can you hear azan in New York at Columbia University? But then I tried to calm myself, and follow the sound. I crossed the Morningside. I saw azan is coming from Harlem. I saw like a mosque there, and I remembered what I read, in his biography. I said, this must be Malcolm X mosque, and azan must be coming there. So this was a moment of like a union, almost like with Malcolm X. So for me, he's the one who brought azan to New York, and he paid a very high price for bringing azan to New York. He was like a shaheed, and Allah Ta'ala honored him with shahada, which is the highest level, Islamically. So he sacrificed his life, and so this is the biggest sacrifice. and this kind of people, they are honored by God also. So then, this connection with Malcolm X made me think, what can I do for these black people who convert to Islam? I should do something for them. And I served for 5 years as the president of Muslim Association. And I organized an activity which I called it Madrasa Yusufiya. Madrasa Yusufiya, School of Joseph. Because Prophet Joseph, Yusuf, he was prisoned, and he turned prison into a school. And he was educating other prisoners there. So I call this activity Madrasa Yusufiya activity, and then in English, School of Joseph. And every Thursday we used to go to Rikers Island. Rikers Island, and at the entrance of the Rikers Island, it was written, the largest correctional facility in the free world. Those Americans, they are proud of having the biggest of everything. And then we told them, you should not be proud of having the biggest prison in the world. Remove this. This is not a good thing. But alhamdulillah, then they removed it. I said, how can you be proud of having the biggest prison in the world? This, perhaps we help them to learn about Islam, and they liked most listening to the Quran. I'm not a good Quran reciter, but when I recited Quran, they were so happy because they like music. These black people, they like music. So they really enjoyed listening to Quran, although I'm not up to summit. And also when I told them glory of Islamic civilization, they were very happy with that as well. But I also learned a lot of things from those prisoners. So one day I asked one of them, hey bro, what's up? And he said, ups alhamdulillah, downs alhamdulillah. This is like a life lesson for me. I never forget it. Ups, thanks to God. Downs, thanks to God. Ups alhamdulillah, downs alhamdulillah. So I always remember this. It's like a life lesson from him. Also, we have very interesting stories. This is like a top security prison. And we wanted to give them some books, Introduction to Islam, and also translation of the Quran, and also Life of Prophet by Martin Links. We took 3 boxes, 1 box, Introduction to Islam, 1 box, Life of Prophet Muhammad, Martin Links, and 1 box, the Quran. And the chaplain announced this in the conference. He said that the students from Columbia University, they brought some books, and he said, I will give them to you as reward. So those who learn A'udhu Basmala, they will get introduction, Fatiha, this, and then, because for those Americans, the most difficult thing is to pronounce Arabic. Very difficult. So they really deserve this reward. And then he made 3 things. Those who reward. And the next day, he went to his room. The books were stolen. It's like a top security prison. I can't believe they stole the books. You see this thirst, for knowledge. They want to get the books and read it. And sometimes, I saw in the hands of those prisoners, the Quran, they read every page, marked, footnotes, unbelievable. Neither myself nor any of my students studied any book like that. This is unbelievable, subhanallah. So I think Mark Twain said, I did not allow schools to disrupt my education. So Alhamdulillah, he didn't go to school. That's why he wasn't very smart. So when you go to school, you lose some of your intellectual abilities. It's good that he didn't go to school. That's why he maintained his fatra. And also, like, we have this prejudice that education comes only from school, which is not true. Like, we are brainwashed, to think that way. I mean, people can educate themselves outside school as well, and sometimes it will be better, if you have the environment and the good conditions. So education does not mean school only, and sometimes school may not be so good for education either. This is what we see in his life. So I'm happy that he dropped out of school. If he continued in school, he was going to be a lawyer trying to make money. But dropping out of school taught him life. And this was a real education for him. He was kind of he kind of dropped out of the line of production in the factory of education. So he grew independently outside that. So when I look at his life, how he grew spiritually, intellectually, from a hedonistic black man to a universal human rights advocate. This is a miracle. Someone like him, his family background, the city where he was born, reaching to this level, none of those educated Americans who went to Ivy League universities, reached to his level when you measure impact, So don't measure impact only by looking at, how many citations you have in Google Scholar, So this is how they condition us, So he didn't have any article published in any of those respected academic journals, but he had the highest impact, I don't see any other black scholar from America, with such a universal impact, all over the world. So how he reached, to this point, what was his intellectual and spiritual journey? I divided into three periods. So first period is the Malcolm Little period, the second period, Malcolm X period, and the third period, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz period. So this corresponds to three levels of nafs in Islam. So nafs amara, nafs lawama, and nafs mutma'inna. So Malcolm Little is nafs amara level. A person hedonistically following the passions and the desires, value-free, careless about any values. So that's the nafs amara period. And then the second period, like Malcolm X, so I call this nafs lawama period. So how he made this transition from nafs lawama from nafs amara, completely enslaved by his desires and passions without caring any norm, any morality or ethical rules, to this critical. So nafs amara means a hedonistic person. Hedonistic person, following his desires without any limits.
Inside the example from the Quran.
Yes, and then the Malcolm X is a spiritual and intellectual transformation from Malcolm Little to Malcolm X. So this transformation is signified in the change of the name, but still searching, because X means unknown. Still search. So this is lawama. Lawama means self-criticism. Like a hedonistic person doesn't have any self-criticism. But awareness first starts with self-critique. Okay, am I right or wrong? What are the things that I am doing wrong? So this self-critique is lawama. Lawama in Arabic means blaming yourself, criticizing yourself. So this transition happened, and I thank Dr. Akel because he provided the historical chronology of the events. I don't go into these details. So this Malcolm X period, I think the Nefsi Lawame period, questioning himself, becoming aware that this hedonistic life is not good. One must have some values, some connection with the metaphysics, with God, etc. So there's a big transformation, and also when you look at it from rights advocate perspective, Malcolm Little didn't care about the rights of others, but Malcolm X start caring about others also, because the spiritual growth, intellectual growth, make you start caring about others. Somebody who doesn't care about others is someone who did not grow intellectually and spiritually. Intellectual growth, spiritual growth makes you care about the environment, about people around you, poor people, destitute people, exploited people, and you think about doing something. So in his immediate vicinity, there were like black people who were exploited. So he became black nationalist, defending rights of the black people under the guidance of Elijah Muhammad. So Elijah Muhammad, he's a very interesting person. I met two of his sons. I also met some people who knew Malcolm X, rahimahullah. So he's a mystery. He's a mystery. He taught a very interesting concept of Islam. I believe personally he intentionally designed it that way to deprogram the black minds. The concept deprogramming? Deprogramming, like, sometimes they brainwash captives. Let's say American soldiers, they were brainwashed by Russians. So when they came back to America, they tried to correct this brainwashing. So this is called deprogramming. So those blacks, they were brainwashed to feel themselves slaves and inferior to the white people. So Elijah Muhammad, I think he was a great psychologist. He tried to make them like a shock, shock therapy. So instead of thinking like we are slaves, we are lower people, he reversed it. He said, no, you are the masters. Those people, they are evil. They are shaitan. You are the real human beings. They are not the humans. So I think this was kind of intentional shock therapy. And my evidence for this, his two sons, Ekber Muhammad and Waristum Muhammad, he sent them to Egypt to study in Al-Azhar, which is a Sunni Islamic institution. And both of them are married to Sunni Muslim women. So if he didn't like the Sunni Islam, he wouldn't send his sons to Al-Azhar. And both of them, mashallah, good Muslims. And I met both of them. One is professor of history, Ekber Muhammad, in Binghamton, Sunni Binghamton, respected scholar. And Waristum Muhammad, he died, rahimahullah. And my last interaction was with him was in Chicago. He invited me to Chicago. He said through his son Layla, he wanted to send African American young kids, to come to Istanbul and learn Islam in Istanbul, and then come back and educate their own community, because he said like he's been sending to other countries and he was not very happy, with the outcome, the education they have. He wanted kind of like an interpretation, a practice of Islam which is suitable for the American context. But after he passed away, it was not realized. And the person who taught Islam to Elijah Muhammad, his name is Muhammad Fard, and he's from the city of Bursa in Istanbul. Very interesting connection, and it's in the biography. He told Malcolm X. So anyway, so this continued for some time, but then another transformation in his life. Transformation from Malcolm X to Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabbas. And this is what I call transformation from Nafs al-Ammara to Nafs al-Mutmainnah, the content nafs, the happy nafs, spiritual happiness. So this journey is analyzed by Muslim scholars. They call it as-safar fil watan, as-safar fil watan, a journey in the homeland. It's an inner journey. It's not a journey in geography. It's not a journey in like a space. It's a journey inside, moving from hedonism to being a content person. You are happy with who you are, and you are happy with God's decisions about you. So this happiness comes with contentment. If there's no contentment, no happiness. That's why it's called the nafs mutmainnah, the content self, and the happy nafs. So this is the opposite of hedonism. Rather than pursuing your own pleasures without any limits, without any constraints, you dedicate your life to the service of other people. And this is exactly what he did, and this is the futuwah. This is the futuwah. And at this point, he abandoned black nationalism. He became human nationalist. You didn't hear this concept before, right?
No.
Human nationalism.
No.
This is Adamiyya.
MashaAllah.
This Adamiyya, human nationalism. So we belong to the nation of Adam alayhi salam. I know this anachronism. So Dr. Akel already said that he learned in Hajj, كلكم من آدم وآدم من تراب. You are all children of Adam, and Adam is created from dust. So this is what he learned. So Hajj, big school, big transformative experience. Hajj transformed him from Malcolm X to Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabbas, from Nafs Lawame to Nafs Mutmainnah. So his letter from Hajj to America, letter from Mecca to America, I highly recommend that you read this book, this letter. In this letter, which he sent as a fax, at that time there was fax, no internet, so he said, here I see people, their eyes are blue, green, blonde, we sit together, we hug each other, we sleep on the same place, and they hug me. He said, like, I have never imagined such a thing happen in America. And he said, America can solve race problem by accepting Islam. So this was like a bombshell in America. They didn't really like the fact that he abandoned black nationalism and became a universalist, and adopted this universal understanding of Islam. So before he openly told the white people, I hate you, and then there is a story that like one beautiful white girl comes to him and says, how can I help you? He says, you cannot help me. When he abandoned this black nationalist position and became universalist human rights advocate, this was really disturbing to authorities in America. I strongly suggest, recommend you read this letter. So he reached to the concept of Adamiyya. Subhanallah, I'm born Muslim, my 10 generations are Muslims, and I discovered Adamiyya at the age of 40. Like after studying in Turkey, in America, in Al-Azhar, everything, so this book is the outcome of this, discovery. But this guy, not going to Al-Azhar, not born to a Muslim family, like how he reached, to this insight. I think this is وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who struggle in my path, Allah promises, we will guide them to the right path. Because he was struggling honestly, sincerely, and Allah guide him to this, understanding, this universal understanding of human rights. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ فَيُعَلِّمْكُمُ اللَّهِ. Practice good morality, piety, and Allah will teach you. So he was taught, he was inspired, to come to this point. Unlike me, like studying with sheikhs, going to schools and doing PhD, subhanallah. So, in my view, this is his legacy. The universal human rights grounded in Islam, this is his legacy. And we need to reclaim this legacy if we really love and appreciate, Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shahbaz, and this is like one of the motivators for me, to work on the concept of Adamiyya and the universal approach to human dignity from an Islamic perspective. So in his time, there was another, person, Martin Luther King. So the ideological difference between the two, Malcolm X said, black problem in America is a human rights problem. We must go to UN to solve it. But Martin Luther King, he said, no, it's a civil rights problem. We should go to US Congress to solve it. So these are two paradigms in the field of rights. But Americans in general, the nationalist Americans, they hate human rights, universal human rights. Even today, like those Republicans, they don't like human rights, they don't like UN, so they did not really like to be embarrassed in front of the world, like in UN, that America, which is presented as the champion of human rights, there are like so many violations, and this guy, he's gonna bring all the dirty, clothes to UN and demonstrate to the whole world, so destroy all the image of America. So they were very unhappy with that. So they martyred him. But at the same time, they martyred Martin Luther King also. Like one is Christian, the other is Muslim. And here also we see like how religion, makes people care about others to the extent that they are ready to sacrifice, their lives, for a good cause, to be able to bring happiness to the life of the others. So these are transformative leaders, motivated by their religious faith. And again, we see the connection between the religion and human rights. And I personally believe if human rights is not grounded in religion, it will not survive. Because when your values clashes with your interest, what will make you give priority to your values? So let's say for a government or for an individual, if a human right contradicts, clashes with an interest, okay, what will make you give priority to the interest, to the human rights? What will make? Like a principle, clashing with interest. So only a religious conviction, can make you sacrifice your interest and give priority to the human rights. Otherwise, if you're a capitalist, if you're an atheist, it's very unlikely, to sacrifice like your interest, for the sake of, some value. So I would like to conclude once again asking the question like I asked in the beginning, what's his legacy to humanity? Not just Muslim, to humanity. I think his legacy is universal human rights, brotherhood of children of Adam, and he collaborated with so many people from different ideological backgrounds, to defend human rights. And he said we have to stand for the rights of anyone, regardless of who he is. So this is something very important, and this is the Islamic approach, and this is in our Islamic jurisprudence books. This in our Quran, this in Hadith. But I'm like so surprised. It's like it's a miracle. Like this person like reached to this understanding, although he did not got like a formal Islamic education. So I'd like to suggest that we all reclaim this legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajab. I will not say Dean.
Actually, I don't like professor. I don't like dean. Just call me Recep. Finished. Let's go beyond all this.
Let us pray that we move from Nafsul.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, Alhamdulillah, now we are in time. Inshallah, we'll move to the commentator. The first one will be Ambassador Ghulam Hussein. Ambassador Ghulam is the ambassador of South Africa to Qatar, and he been ambassador to many capitals. He is very active in international relationship. So, Ambassador Ghulam, you have 5 minutes, inshallah, to make your intervention.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Let me begin by first congratulating Professor Mustafa, Dr. Recep and Dr. Akel for their very enlightening presentations, and also for convening this very important discussion. My first contact with Malcolm X was as a young activist in South Africa. I was told by some of our mentors to read the autobiography of Malcolm X. And at that time, Malcolm X autobiography was banned in South Africa. So we had to remove the cover or cover it with a newspaper and read it when nobody sees you, because you risk being imprisoned for reading it. And on reflecting, I asked, why would the South African government ban a book from an American activist that was far, far away? And remember, at those days, we had no internet. Newspapers were 2 or 3 days later with news. So the means of communication were not as effective as it is now. And as I reflect, I think that there are certain parallels and certain lessons from his life which scared the apartheid regime. And I think not only the apartheid regime, but any oppressive government or any oppressive society would be scared by the lessons of his life. And, in the 1960s, Malcolm X made the transition from this world to the year after in 1965. And at the same time, across the Atlantic Ocean, I'd like to think that 2 tragic events were taking place. One was Nelson Mandela and his colleagues were arrested and sent to prison. And incidentally, Robben Island, where they were in prison, was also regarded as a revolutionary university. So they gained their knowledge and tightened or sharpened the ideological tools and understanding in prison. On a lighter note, the other tragic event perhaps was that I was born in 61. The lessons that we learn from this thing is firstly that I think that, from his life experience, is that reading is absolutely necessary. the gaining of knowledge transforms you from nobody to a thinking human being, and from a thinking human being to a conscious human being, someone with consciousness and concern for others. And as you gather knowledge, it's a continuous process and a necessary process in transformation of not only of individuals but of communities as well. Unfortunately, we are living in an age where intensive reading has been replaced by cryptic text and so on, and that is not only damages the intellectual tradition but also progressiveness and also practice of human beings. You also learn that truth has a price. You know, we used to sing a song that says, "Freedom isn't free, you've got to pay the price, you've got to pay the sacrifice." And Malcolm X paid the ultimate price for the truth when he realized the ultimate truth of our common humanity, and something which we in South Africa call Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is a concept where he says, I am a human being because of you. You're not a human being in isolation of each other. My being depends on you. He paid the ultimate price for that. More importantly also, I think his Hajj experience shows that the transformation of societies is not an intellectual endeavor, but comes from common behavior. You can preach human rights, you can lecture about human rights, but unless you don't practice it and you don't inculcate it as a mode of behavior, it means nothing. You realize that Malcolm X was a black consciousness adherent, and this Hajj experience, the way he was treated, it is not the lectures or the khutbahs that changed him. It was the behavior of fellow Muslims that changed his thing and made him realize our common humanity, which is so lacking these days. The apartheid government feared also Malcolm X because it was black consciousness. In South Africa, after the banning of the ANC, there was a lull in the liberation movement, but in the 70s, there was a rise of black consciousness. And the basic argument was that racism and apartheid was a black problem caused by whites, so it will be solved only by blacks. And they should, and was killed by the apartheid government, their proposals. But thereafter, the political move, and then the third phase is to be all inclusive in your freedoms. And in your freedoms also, I think the debate that arose is should the state or should we grant rights to groups or to individuals? The propensity in South Africa was to go away from group rights because apartheid was based on group rights. Whites had certain amount of rights, blacks had lesser rights, people of Indian origin has lesser rights. The approach we took is that you obtain your rights as an individual, not as a group, and that's why we have the Bill of Rights and a Bill of Rights as well. So I think finally geopolitics and the world has now evolved to such an extent that we are seeing ideologies and tolerance of injustices as we see that's happening in Gaza. It's the dehumanization of people that leads to genocide and a catastrophe that we're seeing now. And I think Malcolm X's life, his whole evolution in instilling pride, but most importantly, in recognizing the basic humanness of each other, the Ubuntu in each other. That would be the panacea for our problems. And it's a tide that we should perhaps recommit ourselves to, especially with what we are seeing in the world today. Malcolm X is, has been a phenomenal influence throughout the world. More specifically in South Africa, we could continue the whole evening with it, but I want to stop there and reflect that our basic humanness and our behavior towards each other and our learning should perhaps be the antidote for the madness and the idiocy that we are going through at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Professor Mohammed al-Shergawi. Professor Mohammed al-Shergawi is the professor of conflict resolution and diplomacy. He is the head of PhD program at Jawan Ben Jassim Academy for Defense. He was a member of panel of experts to UN, and now also he's a senior fellow at the Jazeera Center of Study. So 5 minutes.
Sure. Thank you, Professor Al-Amin. I approached the legacy of Malcolm from the perspective of conflict resolution and peace building, not only within the American society, but also across other societies. If we consider his relationship and his experience in Saudi Arabia during the pilgrimage, the rest of the Middle East, and as the ambassador has just mentioned, his insights had reached South Africa and beyond. Earlier, Professor Rajab mentioned the word transformation at least 5 times. And I think this transformation point is very important in digesting the legacy of the man, not because transformation as a process. I read it in a different way. It is a transformation as a normative value, and this is how we can understand the journey of social change that Malcolm was advocating inside the United States, outside and around the United States. So I would like to highlight 4 main points that I take from the experience of Malcolm. One is reform. The second one is transformation, and I will talk a little bit about that. And then the third one is reconciliation. And the fourth and last one is temporality of Islam through the experience of Malcolm X. So I think I should start with reform, and reform can be divided into 2 directions. One, his differences with Elijah Muhammad. And Elijah Muhammad had a twist on Islam. He thought he can engineer his own American Islam. Here we are, we have Malcolm X, this revolutionary figure who did not accept that, so we should take that into consideration, that he was trying to insist on keeping the spirit of the religion within black nationalism and not letting it drift away from that. The other aspect of reform is, imagine you are a black man in the 50s or the 60s in the United States, where the mainstream of politics was McCarthyism. McCarthy, as a senator, was creating this environment of suspicion and fear against whoever is going against the tide. So we should understand that Malcolm was a man, principled man for positive reform, and he was not taking it, according to, he was not pro-establishment. He was more of a revolutionary figure who decided to defy certain norms, certain rules, and he stood to power. I'd move to the second point, transformation, and here I would like also to mention there is transformation of the selfhood of Malcolm X before 1964 and after. So he went through a major reconstruction of himself, both spiritually, intellectually, and also in terms of his worldview. So I think it was not just a transformation that starts from one point to the other in a way that it may zigzag or go around certain detours, but it was like a sharp turn, 180 degree that took him in a different direction. And here I think we still need to discover, and this is where research has not completed the task, I think we still need to dig out exactly those days that he spent in Mecca, his experience with Hajj, and not how we read it from outside. We need to sort of change the direction, how Malcolm X was looking at his new discovery and how he was interpreting this. I think this is a very important moment to read Islam through the eyes and the mind of this young man coming from far away, and suddenly he accepted and he was rediscovering Islam, and he was also rediscovering himself. And also by the token of transformation, I would like to flip it around. Now it's not the man, let's talk about the religion of this man. I think by the time he went back to the United States, he became an advocate of what could be the real Islam within that context. So there is this correction, if you like, or this going back to the origin of what Quran, what Hadith was saying, and sticking to the main sources without misinterpretation. So I look at this transformation. So basically we have transformative Malcolm X, we have also transformative Islam coming back from Mecca to the United States. I move to the third point, reconciliation. Dr. Rajab talked about al-nafs al-ammara and then al-nafs al-mutma'inna. And I think in those who work in conflict resolution, who deal with trauma healing, appreciate what I'm going to say now, because it's not the psychological, it's not the spiritual dimension within the self that are not stable. There is more going on every single day, and there are those question marks that cannot be settled easily. And here I think reconciliation is a huge task when someone does it on his own. And I think Malcolm X did two aspects or two cycles of reconciliation, one with himself and one with his society and his friends, and all these encounters he had after 1964. Because of time constraints, I'm going to jump quickly into the last point, Malcolm X and temporality of Islam. And I would like to explain what I mean by temporality. Yes, it has been said for many centuries that Islam is good for every time, good for every place. Salih li kulli zamanin wa makan. But then the question is, what are the tools or what are the mechanisms that we can use to prove that yes, we can talk about Islam during the time of Prophet Muhammad, we can talk about Islam in the 25th century for another 4 centuries to come. So what links this Islam, what makes this linear line goes on and on and on and on in a way that it's Ahmadi, al-Ahmadiyya for Islam. Ahmadiyya bimana in a way that it is eternal. It started at a certain point when Wahi came to Prophet Muhammad, the message was sent by God, and then it starts with the assumption or the hypothesis that it is staying for the rest of human existence on this earth. So what I'm taking from Malcolm X, yes, there is a certain wisdom here that yes, when he came back from Mecca, he proved to me at least that yes, here is someone who can confirm, yes, that we have proper temporal, in a way that we can enter or we can re-enter into Islam at any time, at any political geography. So Islam is not just Mecca, it's not just Medina, it's not just Saudi Arabia or the Arab Muslims, but it's a world religion. So I'm very interested in the second part, in Hajj Shabaz's experience, what we can deduct from it in terms of this temporal aspect or temporal quality of Islam, and how we can build on it or capitalize on it for those students and those Westerners and those Asians and those Africans who don't have no idea about Islam except certain stereotype images and sort of Islamophobic, tendencies. So I think there is a lot to learn from Malcolm X's experience with his new point of entry or his re-entry into Islam, coming back in after 1964, coming back from Makkah, in a way that here I'm connecting also with Adamiyya, in a way that if we want to open up to this concept of temporal Islam means anyone, anywhere can embrace it with rationality, not just kind of accept it as a spiritual value. No, there is that rational thinking that goes into accepting or not accepting Islam. So why I'm saying this, because what I read in Malcolm X's experience, that yes, he proved that his Islam, at least his experience with Islam before and after Mecca, can be an example how Islam can be presented as a social order and also as humanism and dignity. And here we can connect once again between these 2 points, social order and humanism and dignity, and the whole weight of global respect for human rights. So basically, with Malcolm X, we have all the ingredients. We just need to put them together, and then we have a good synthesis that can advocate itself to whoever is skeptical about Islam as either reactionary or Islam, or all those stereotypes. So I think there is a lot of rationality, a lot of dignity, and a lot of courage in Malcolm X, and I stop here.
Thank you. Now, thank you very much. We move to the next commentator, Ustaz Muhammad Qutb, who is the Secretary General of the International Muslim Minorities Organization. And he Qatar-based professional since 1993. Most of his time is working in Qatar Petroleum and Data Management. 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Yeah, sure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I thank you for inviting me to this event, reflecting on the legacy of Malcolm X, rahmahullah. Actually, the metamorphosis happened in his life is really an amazing one. Dr. Akel was explaining the chronology of his from birth to his assassination. In fact, he struggled a lot when he was, in his childhood. I hope that if we know how he become in prison, it's because of the life struggle he faced. His father was also murdered, likely murdered, and the children, the orphaned one, mother was struggling with them, and she also later become mentally unfit and admitted for a long time in the hospital, mental hospital. So these children were nowhere, and the American society was not able to accept them because of the African black people were treated not well those days. So the mission, he was forced to, there were several philosophies with the same goal in the United States. As he mentioned, the Nation of Islam, Elijah was one philosophy, Martin Luther King was another philosophy, and Malcolm X, of course, he is, people trying to unlock when we see some problems, or it is a lock actually, so we want to unlock or solve the problem, but we have to use the right key. This is what the example Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, sometime he mentioned, the human being always trying to unlock, but they are not able to. But if they use the true key, then things will be easily, they can unlock. Malcolm X, actually, he was initially joining Nation of Islam, believing that, the civil rights is important and the black nationalism is the solution. But later, he came to pilgrimage, Makkah, where he saw everything, every human being, the white, the black, the Arabs, from different nationalities. We can say different dots in this modern language. The same, if you analyze Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he connected these dots. He also connected the African Bilal bin Rabah, a black, Suhaib al-Rumi from Rome, and Salman al-Farisi from Persia, and Abu Bakr Siddiq from the Arab Quraysh. So all these dots he connected to a human civilization, a human, this is the basis of all human rights and human civilization, in fact. We have to remember this. Even the United Nations accepted these values. I believe this is from Islam. Because God created the human and He knows all of his fitra, or the essence, the chemistry. That's why even the transformation of Malcolm X, the analogy used by Dr. Recep was very befitting to the Quranic, An-Nafs al-Lammara, An-Nafs al-Lawwama, and then, later he became Nafs al-Mutma'inna. So I think the sustainable developments or the freedom, it has to come from within the faith, the ideology. In the absence of a proper ideology, you will not get, as what the Dr. Recep mentioned this, any human rights, anything. We can dream it, but we will not achieve it unless we have a certain ideological the base. So I think we have to, I have a request to the College of Islamic Studies and Hamad bin Khalifa University. Any movement or any organizations, any leadership in the world, they cannot work in the intellectual vacuum. You have to support them with some theoretical, foundations and with the fundamental research. So you should have a dedicated team to help Zohran Mamdani when he became a mayor, and he says, I'm a Muslim, I'm a democratic socialist, I'm not apologetic in any of these things. So the identity, we have to keep our identity always in the up. You don't have to compromise, you don't have to, surrender, but you have to remember one thing. You should not forget the mission, the universalism, the human rights. You are bringing all the dots into one human being on the planet. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mohammed. And now, next is Professor Tijani Abdul Hamid. Professor Tijani is a professor of political science at the Ibn Khaldun Center, Qatar University. He published many books and articles in Islamic studies and political science and economy and development. Professor Tijani, 5 minutes. Thank you. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My direct contact with Malcolm X was from reading his autobiography, not more than that. And I saw the film as well. And I tell you that reading Malcolm X is not a comfortable thing. You will feel very disturbed, in fact, and very painful when you read this book. But also talking about Malcolm X is not easy either. And I have been teaching in many universities in the Arab world for decades. I have never seen a public debate given about Malcolm X. Not a discussion in any classroom. Though we teach political politics and sociology, but Malcolm X is almost completely excluded. I don't know why this is for you to ask, but thank you for bringing us today into the world of Malcolm X, Dr. Rajab and Dr. Mustafa. Before coming here, I was trying to make a quick survey about how researchers and scholars and historians see Malcolm X after 40 years. And I found this kind of description. He is a controversial personality. He is revolutionary. He is a nationalist black leader. He is charismatic. He is indefatigable organizer. He is an activist civil rights. He is an influential ideological hero. All of these descriptions are not wrong. Because yes, he was a revolutionary, he was a nationalist, charismatic, but they explain nothing. These are the superficial characteristics and qualities. And we know that. But what we don't know is the turns and the transformations which he underwent through his life. How to explain these transformations, how to explain these turns into his life. He turned from the life of al-Hawa, as you mentioned him, as a drug dealer and a gang leader, to a black Muslim, and to a civil rights nationalist, and lastly to a universal human rights advocate. These are not simple turns. These are deep transformation, and they are not superficial transformation. They are inner transformation, as you mentioned, spiritual, if you like, transformation. So what caused these things? If we know that, I think we know much about Malcolm X. I figured out like 3 or 4 causes for this deep transformation. One of them is the 6 years in prison. He was in prison for 6 years. So what happened during these 6 years? Then I turned to the 10 years he was with the Nation of Islam. And then he broke away from the Nation of Islam and he adopted his own ways and things. And I would like also to see what lessons can we draw from this experience. Quickly, I think in the 5-6 years he spent in prison, he did three things, concentrated on three things. Self-education, as you mentioned before, self-education. And in this process of educating himself, he focused on language. Almost he copied the dictionary and many other books. And debate, he was a good debater. And then he was a good reader of history and philosophy. These are three specialties which gave him strength later on. A good mastery of language is very important. You cannot talk about Malcolm X without noticing his ability in expressing himself, his eloquency, his mastery over language. This is the source of his influence. Then a debater. He was a very, very, very strong debater, debating the religion, debating history, debating politics. That is also very important. And then his knowledge about history of the world, as you saw the reading list, and history of America and history of the world. Then, in addition to the self-education, man, the self-purification. Self-purification. This is a spiritual
Attention, attention. This is a fire service evacuation announcement. Please leave the building immediately using the nearest exit. Do not use the elevator.
So self-education, self-purification, and faith-based activism and open-mindedness. This is what he gained from the 6 years in prison. Then I turn to the second stage of the 10 years within the Nation of Islam. The 10 years he spent with the Nation of Islam, he proved to be a formidable critical of the American society. He was a very fierceful critic of the society, American society, in every aspect of it. Then he was a very effective organizer while he was in the Nation of Islam. In fact, Nation of Islam itself did not take its shape and strength without the organization skills of Malcolm X. And he was very good in that. But being a good organizer or a critic of a society without having a vision about an alternative society which you are drawing people with will not be helpful. So he was a critic also of the civil rights movement. He was also a critic of his own Nation of Islam. He was not only criticizing the American society or the national civil rights movement, he was also criticizing his own organization for various reasons. And the doctrine of blending Islam with nationalism, the inherent evil of the white man, the natural superiority of blacks, all these things he came to question and to reject. And this is not an easy thing. You can criticize you can criticize other societies, but you cannot criticize yourself, you cannot criticize your own organization. And more serious, you cannot easily criticize your own leaders. So this brings us to the relation between him, the conflict between him and Elijah Muhammad. He was very loyal to his teacher. He was his teacher. He was very loyal to his leader. He was a spiritual leader for him. He was an ideal type of leadership. But alas, he got disappointed on his leader. and that got him into a kind of a moral crisis and a spiritual crisis. What priority does Ali Muhammad has? Shall we be loyal to Islam or loyal to Ali Muhammad? So he broke away, not only for differences on political things, not only for differences on intellectual things, but differences on moral things as well. Moral things as well. And that's what got him into a kind of internal struggle and crisis. To what extent should he follow his leader? And what consequences if he break away from him and from the organization? And that take courage, in fact, and he sacrificed himself because of that, because it was not safe for him. And I think he was assassinated because of this conflict with Ali Muhammad, not for other reasons. So what lessons can we learn from this gentleman? I think one of the things which we can learn, that ignoring the humanistic and universal dimension of Islam will not serve the cause of liberation or the cause of nationalism. Because nationalism by itself does not stand. Racism by itself does not stand. You need to have a more higher base, more spiritual base, moral base. So Islam provides that, because Islam is an international faith. It's not for the black, it's not for the white, it's not for the yellow. It is a universal for all people. The second lesson we can learn is that activism without moral integrity is insufficient. Activism alone is shallow. You need to have some moral integrity, not only intellectual integrity, moral integrity as well. Then, the last lesson I think we can learn from him is that إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. God does not change what is in the people until they change what is in themselves. And that was the starting point for Malcolm X. He started by changing himself from inside, spiritually and intellectually. And then that was enabling him to transform the society. But the cost was very high for this. So to me, Malcolm X was mujtahid and mujahid. Mujtahid in the sense that he was not just a yes man, following whatever thing. So he was having this ability of correcting himself, of adjusting himself, of criticizing himself. This is what we mean by ijtihad. And mujahid is obvious, of course. And the end was martyrdom. He was rewarded by God. Thank you.
As His Excellency Ambassador Quram said, that if we continue till tomorrow morning, we are not going to finish talking about this great man, Malcolm X. But I will give only two for the floor. 1 minute, and then I will take it back to the two authors. Yes, please.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much. There was a lot to learn there, a lot to think about. I have just 4 points, comments, and I'll finish in a minute, inshallah. So I guess the first one is I'm grateful for Dr. Recep and Dr. Mustafa Osman and Dr. Akel for setting this up. We shouldn't take his legacy for granted. People, need to know and need to talk about Malcolm X, and just to kind of highlight how much we need to be cognizant of passing on his message. Even the main source that most people mentioned tonight for about his life, the autobiography, there's problems with it in terms of Alex Haley's positioning. Alex Haley had a relationship with the FBI. One of the chapters that he written, so he finished the manuscript and it was published after he was passed away. And there's a lot of sources now that say that one of the chapters was actually removed. We can talk also about the movies that are made about him. There's a lot of good there, but there's also things that are questionable. So I think we really can't take it for granted. The second thing that I would want to just kind of maybe invite you to comment on is the importance of application. And this talks a little bit to the point that the last speaker made, that he wasn't just in the ivory towers, although he went to the ivory towers. He was about applying and engaging and organizing, to the extent that, of course, before he passed away, he made 2 organizations. One of them was the Muslim Mosque Incorporated for the religious life, and then the Organization of Afro-American Unity for a secular political approach, that we can say, quite loosely. The third thing I would just want to say is, we've mentioned a lot about the letter from Hajj. Of course, that's beautiful, and it's easy, I think, to fall into a bit of self-congratulation about our religion on that point. I want to mention another letter that he wrote before he passed away. Actually, the last thing that he was writing the night before his martyrdom was the letter to Dr. Saeed Ramadan, the son-in-law of Hassan al-Banna and the father of Dr. Tariq Ramadan. And in that letter, in that correspondence, things are a bit more nuanced in terms of race and where Muslims stand, and the need for Muslims to do more in terms of our racism. And I think we can, of course, the story from Hajj is beautiful and it's real, but there's another element there, I guess, where there's more work to be done in terms of internal racism within Islam. And then the last comment, really, just I know we have Dr. Mustafa Osman on the panel. There's a debt. If we think about Malcolm X as a figure who gave a lot to humanity, we have a debt to the Sudanese Muslims who influenced Malcolm X and brought him to Sunni Islam. Dr. Malik Badri, who's one of Dr. Human's teachers, I believe, and Sheikh Ahmed Hassoun, who was his spiritual and religious guide. And again, I want to thank all of the panelists, and this event has been very useful, and I hope we have more on Malcolm X in the future, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Our next regional leader is going to be about Malik Badri, inshallah.
MashaAllah.
Yes, please.
Jazakumullah khairan for the beautiful presentation. With regards to the narrative that was given on Malcolm X's life, we see him moving from ethnocentric nationalism to theocentric universalism. And when we look back into revolutionary Muslim movements, we see a lot of leaders who actually stood for universalism. We're having Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar in India, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, etc. But today, when we talk about the term itself, universal rights, it's become so adulterated that you are not seen as a universal human rights leader until you are accepting the alphabet club, LGBTQ. Right? For example, Zohran Namdani in New York, even though he's looked at as a universal human rights leader, he's standing for the Muslim rights, ethnic rights, etc. But at the same time, he has to stand for LGBTQ rights. So as Dr. Rajab rightly said, you cannot detach human rights from morality. And as Dr. Hamd Rahma also said, morality is something that is fundamental to human rights. So if we are to actually give the message to the next generation, as in you got to be universal human rights leaders, where do we draw the boundaries? Because now we can't. As in, if we're not accepting LGBTQ, then we will not be universal human rights leaders. How do we reconcile?
Thank you very much. Then back to Professor Rajab and Professor Akel, if you have any comment, so that we can then go to refreshment.
Okay, people try to insert new rights to human rights, okay? And they make a lot of propaganda to be able to insert, what they think like a new human rights, and they try to frame it as the third generation of human rights. And none of these rights that you mentioned are listed in the UN Charter, nor in the European Union, convention. So they are not listed there. But these people, they lobby and successfully, and they put it in the agenda of the governments and make them accept it. So like this, one of the standard questions like I'm asked when I talk about hukuk al-adamiyin. So like I'm not saying in Islam we have human rights the way they have. Our concept of human rights is completely different. It's hukuk al-adamiyin. That's why I kept the original Islamic concept adamiyya in the title of my book. Like it is hukuk al-adamiyin. So I'm not saying like we have human rights or we had human rights before they had. So I'm saying we have a different paradigm for human rights is completely different than what the other civilizations have. It's called in Arabic حقوق الآدميين or عصمة الآدميين or حرمة الآدميين. And this is like one of the standard questions, like anytime I give a lecture, you know, or a talk in Europe, America, anywhere. So like this question comes like, okay, what do you think about LGBT? I say, like, you drink alcohol, we disagree with you, but it's legally permitted for you. You can go and drink as much as you want. It's up to you. And like, interest is haram in our religion, but you take interest, and it's legally permissible in your country. You can go ahead and do it. So this other things may be legally permissible in your country. Don't expect us to agree and support them. You are free to do it. We are not going to intervene with it, but don't expect us to approve it. Same thing, smoking. You know, like it's not permissible in our religion, but you smoke. Okay, it's up to you. If it's legal in your own society, you can go ahead and do it. So from the hukuk al-adamiyin perspective, we make a distinction between the dignity of the individual and his actions. Okay? So we respect the individual, he's inviolable, untouchable, but some of his actions may be wrong. You know, it doesn't mean like you respect the person, you will approve everything he does. If you are critical or you are not approving some of the things like people are doing, it doesn't mean you don't respect him. Let's say you have a child and you really love your child, right? But when the child does something wrong, you know, you criticize him and you tell him don't do it. And this critique does not mean you hate your child. You know, it doesn't mean you don't respect your child. So I think this distinction is very important. This is what protects you from being racist. Like a racist, they hate the individual, you know, and the individual himself or herself. You know, but as Muslims, like we disagree with some of the actions which contradict with our values, but we love the individual himself or herself. So that's the distinction.
Professor Ahmed, you want to answer?
No, I'll yield my time. I can give my time to somebody who wants to ask a question.
Okay.
So I can get some barakah.
Thank you very much. So we invite you to stay with us for the refreshment, and then you can continue your discussion during the refreshment outside.
No, I don't.